Our guest today, she's a dynamo. Smart, intelligent, wise. She's going to give us some very pragmatic tools to help us navigate difficult seasons for a better outcome. Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Welcome, Anne MacIver. How are you?
Welcome, Annie.
I'm great. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me here.
I know you, of all the guests, you've come the farthest.
So
you
far.
flew here from Chicago, correct?
Yeah, so factually, that is, facts. I came from Chicago. I came just for you guys. I was offered also a Zoom opportunity, but I think everything goes a lot better when you're
Absolutely
sharing the same space.
We're glad you're here.
We're very glad
Thank
you're
you.
here. You're the founder of Rise Mediation and WHD Consulting.
Right.
You happen to have a good friend who is on the True North team, Danielle, as well. Here, y'all maybe did college together?
College, law school, lots of things I can't tell you about.
Let's pause there. Maybe you could. She's not here.
Hey, we also actually got married around the same time, maybe within a year of each other. We actually,
No way.
we touched base. I reached out to her and said something like, oh my God, I got to tell you, I'm getting a divorce. She said, me too. Same month, same year after like 18
You
years
guys
of
are,
marriage.
yeah. You're
Same
tracking.
trajectories through
Well,
life.
I need to know, do you remember when you and Danielle met?
We met in college, and I don't
Same
really
class,
have any
all
strong.
that?
No, she was 2 years behind me,
Okay.
my sister's class.
Okay.
Don't have a whole lot of memories of her from college.
Yeah.
We really hit the ground running when we met in law school.
Okay.
I had taken 2 years off, so I'm 2 years older than she is.
Ah.
I know that comes as a great surprise to you, but that's how we ended up synced class-wise.
Then you synced up in law
Yeah,
school.
that's right. That's right.
Undergrad was,
At Princeton.
yeah, like we didn't already know that.
Yeah. I'm sure Danielle
Yeah,
advertises
Danielle's
it
told
every.
us that once or twice.
She's got a lot of school spirit.
Yes.
100%.
She does.
She's loyal, which is
a good way
A
to
lot
put
of
it.
school spirit.
very good.
Yeah.
Where was law school?
University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Awesome. Very cool.
And we really got together like the very first day there. It was off to the races.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
Where were you raised? Where are you from?
I'm from Houston, Texas.
Come on, let's go.
Go
You know the
easy on
Rangers
us.
beat the Astros this year, right?
You know, I heard something about that, and I thought, I just hope they lose before I get to Dallas. There's not a lot of traffic.
Well, we love Houston, and obviously
You
you're
strike
y'all
that.
got a few more under your belt than we do.
And they had
but
a good NFL game on Sunday.
Yes, you did.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So you were raised in Houston.
Yeah, although I was raised an Oilers fan, so I'm going to really date myself. I was raised in Houston. I
Love
went
the
to
Oilers.
St. John's. I went for 100 years to St. John's, and then my whole life. Left to, let's see, when I went to Princeton, I've never lived in Houston again since then. But my
You
parents
haven't?
are still there. I've got a sister and her family are there. My brother is one brother's teacher in Austin. The other is in Virginia. So oldest of 4.
You still have a lot of Texas roots.
I
or
have
family.
a lot. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yes. Both my parents are extremely active, and they're both lawyers. One's a retired judge on the appellate bench in Texas, in the first district, and my dad is a lawyer. They both now teach. My mom's been a professor at Rice, and my dad's teaches at South Texas Law. So
Staying busy, good for them.
staying busy.
Yeah, their health is good.
Yeah, really good.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Take big trips with them every year. This year we were in the Arctic Circle. Last year,
Oh,
Alaska.
cool.
Yeah. They're
What's
active.
the
They're off to
takeaway?
Africa in a few months.
Yeah, what's the takeaway from the Arctic Circle?
That you can swim, or you can be in a zodiac with polar bears swimming like feet from you
Seriously?
and survive. Yeah, that's my takeaway. We had a polar bear mom
Holy cow.
and her 2 cubs, and we watched her for like an hour from the zodiac, and then she decided she was going to take them off the beach into the water at the most convenient jumping off point, which was like right. I mean, of the whole place she could have chosen. It was like right in front of our zodiac. And I worried that they'd swim underwater, like sharks.
100%.
Yeah, no, they're good. They're like, right on top of the water. You can see them coming. They look like they're moving slowly. She really just wanted to do her own thing, and she didn't really want to eat all of us, so it worked out well.
I'm going to need to know how big is a zodiac. Is that
Yeah, not big enough.
Is this really a canoe?
it's rubber, right? You
In Texas, would we call this a canoe?
Right. It's the thing where if they bite it, it's going to shooting off like a balloon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a nervous moment or two there.
A nervous moment. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. How did you find Princeton from Houston?
Oh, other than the dreary weather, because it's gray, right? It's not just the cold or the rain. It's really just gray skies were kind of new for me. We get a lot of rain in Houston, but it's largely sunny. Other than that, I thought it was amazing. I definitely got the y'all beaten out of me, and I had
shame and bullying.
all
got
of
that
it. I mean, the
removed.
shame that was rained upon me. I had a roommate from Cincinnati and a roommate from Tenafly, New Jersey, and they were having none of it. So the Texas accent, I had to, get rid of quickly. I always sneak it back when I was drinking, come off the strong accent. But yeah, I loved it. It was really a very different experience in all the right ways, and obviously I loved being on my own so much in different parts of the country that I haven't come back to live in Houston. Great as the city as it is.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, it's phenomenal schools, Ivy League, but did you know you wanted to go to Ivy League?
No, I did not want to go to the Ivy League. So I lost a bet with my parents. I actually wanted to go to school in California. And I was told by my parents that California was weird. So I had to...
That's a good Texan family right there. His daughter... goes to university in California.
Oh, does she? Did you not give her the California's weird
Well,
speech?
she's at Pepperdine.
So
she's in Malibu.
she's a little...
it's the 5 miles not.
You just wanted to go visit her.
She's a little insulated.
Yeah, there's some self-interest right there. You can see it. Okay, I see what's going on.
For sure.
So when I lost this bet with my parents, I ended up having to go on a college tour of the East Coast. And they took me to 13 schools when they were really trying to... And I narrowed it down to 2 I think I really liked, and I really thought I would go to UVA. And it really came down to May 1st, making that decision. And I was actually at Princeton, and a lot of it was laziness. I could just drop my card off in the office, or I could actually go find a post office and mail this card.
Gives us a little insight into you. I get it. You don't like the mundane.
I like shortcuts when they're more efficient.
Smarter, not harder.
That's right. I know I'm going to do well wherever I end up. I'm going to have fun, make the most of it. Yeah.
So I assume you knew you wanted to be an attorney because you mom and dad, or not? Yeah.
That was a failure of imagination. You're detecting a pattern now on the laziness front. I started out as a languages major. So
okay.
I had been traveling, and now it's done all the time. But when I was in the 80s in high school, it was not done all the time. So that you would go and live with a family overseas. So I had already been an exchange student 3 times, I think, before I even applied to Princeton, and
I've not known many who did it a second or a third time. So you had good experiences, and/or your parents.
Yeah, so I would do in high
you?
school. I just did every summer. I would go and spend 3 months with a family somewhere, speaking the language.
Yeah.
If I could getting a job. Then that continued even in college. I went and lived by myself in an apartment in France when I was in college, and then I lived with a family in Brazil, and I kept doing it for 3 months a year, 3 months a year, and then I lived in Argentina when I graduated college. So I was trying to do all 4 Romance languages. Well, Romanian is a Romance language, but they didn't really offer it there. So Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and ran into some logistics hurdles with the department that didn't want me to spread myself too thin, and then I took my ball and went to a different department. And I ended up majoring in abridging the philosophy department and the politics department, which wasn't really it. They didn't have political philosophy as a major then. They didn't have political science. So kind of created my own. And then I came out in a recession. I graduated college in 91, and they weren't looking for a lot of philosophy majors. And I had a job lined up before I went to Princeton. I was going to work for the sex crimes unit for the Los Angeles DA's office.
So you were going to get to California.
I was getting to California. I was. I was still right, let's stay on target.
Don't lose your train of thought.
That's right.
Okay, don't lose your train of thought. What was the bet that you lost with your mom and dad?
Okay. It was a math-based bet. So
I never had this in my house.
Me either.
I never had this in my house.
I try to keep this as a, under wraps that I ever knew anything about math, because I'm in such a writing and a creative and a puzzle solving world. But math was not just by a little bit, but by far and away my best subject when I was growing up. And I was really bored by it. So by the time I got to senior year, that was the first time at my high school that you could drop math. You just needed the 3 years. And I was so excited to drop math. But my parents were looking at the rest of my grades and going, you need to stay in math.
Yeah. This is rescuing the other part.
Exactly. And we don't trust that you're going to step it up and anything else. So, so I'm really stubborn. And there wasn't a bet at this point. It wasn't so much of a bet as like, a game of chicken. And I'm really stubborn. I thought, I'm not going to, they can make me go, but they can't make me do anything.
Right.
So I just sat there and I would like draw pictures. Then I'd show up for the test and I'd draw pictures. And I would never answer any of the questions, never do the homework. About 3 weeks in, I said, Mom and Dad, I just got to tell you I have a 0. I have a 0 in math. So you probably want me to drop that because it's not going to be really good for my GPA. Or my career trajectory. And my parents, really was more like letting them save face on their exit.
Yeah.
That more than a bet, because they decided to make a deal with me that I could drop math, even though, again, they had no leverage because of who they were deep down inside.
Right.
But I let them to believe they did. So they had this, you will be allowed to drop math if you will go with your dad on a college tour of the East Coast and apply to at least one East Coast school.
So you saw it as I got rid of what I didn't want and I got travel out of it.
Yeah.
And
but they get the last laugh.
Yeah, they do get the last laugh.
I did go to an East Coast school.
So now you're considering what to do. You had a job lined up. Walk us through that. Yeah.
So I had a job lined up. I was interested in law, but I was only interested in criminal law.
Okay.
And I was specifically interested in criminal defense because I wasn't a fool and I wanted to make money and I wanted to provide for myself. I didn't see that the government was going to be my ticket to that. But I knew that most of the really successful criminal defense lawyers started out in prosecution. And that's how, that informed the strength of their defense work.
100%.
Later. Right. So I had a job lined up with the Manhattan. I'm sorry, I keep saying that. I don't know why, because I ended up in New York, probably why, but with the LA DA's office. And then I went to Argentina for my graduation gift from college, and I wanted to go back. I'd lived down there before the family. I wanted to go back and see the family and live there for a little bit. So I was going to go for 2 weeks. I changed it to 3 weeks. I changed it to 5 weeks, and I said, I'm not coming back. So that's when I lost that job because I had no idea when I was going to come back.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I came back after about a year, I think. I ended up teaching English down there. And then I went out to California because all my stuff had been shipped there from college.
Oh, and wow. Yeah.
So I had my car and I had my stuff and I was out there and I really didn't have a plan and it was Southern California and it was summer and...
Not having a plan wasn't so bad.
It's kind of okay to not have a plan in the summer in Southern California.
Motivated.
Yeah.
So I ended up, I think I was in New York for some other reason, and I think I got this job, at least the interview or something, maybe through my dad, if I recall correctly, I think, because my parents were still trying to like mold me and fix me. So they said,
we can fix her. Yeah,
we can fix her. There's still hope. So they said, she's birth order. She's the oldest kid. She's got to, at some point, she's going to fall in line, right? So I was in New York. They said, just take this interview with Sherman or send your resume to Sherman and Sterling, big firm in New York at the time. And so I said, well, I'll just do the interview. And then I actually really, really like dug the people that I talked to. And I thought, oh, well, all right, I don't have anything else going on. I don't really want to interview for a second job.
Right.
I'm just like, again, got a job offer and I'm just going to take that instead of putting any more work in. And so I ended up in New York. And I think there were 11 legal assistants hired that year. And only 2 decided to go on to law school after that because it was rough.
Yeah.
I spent many, I would say, 36-hour work shifts. You use the showers in the office. You're in the same clothes you were in the day before. Evenings, long nights at the financial printers. I was doing SEC work, and it was most of them did not decide to apply to law school after that. Where it, and it can be. It was at that time anyway. I don't know how it is now, but at that time it was a traditional path to law school.
Okay.
And you knew that you were going to have good recommendations should you choose that. And so I did actually. I really, really got lucky working with some cool people there, and I saw the possibilities, and I thought, well, you know what? I'll just go here, and then I can. Still thinking I'm going to go work as this criminal. I'll just make some money here and I'll stash it away and then I'll go to law school and I'll be a criminal defense lawyer.
Yep. So
I'm
what
not a
happens
criminal
in there?
defense lawyer.
Yeah. So
Something goes wrong.
so this is the transition between Princeton and Michigan Law
Right.
School.
Right.
So you do that. What kind of
How long were you in that job?
Let's see. I was almost a year in Argentina, so I was a little over a year there. I took the 2 years off. And traditionally, it's a 2-year program, but I think I left after like 14 months. But because I was going to law school, I had plenty of support for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Obviously, through that difficult work life situation, you decided to become a lawyer.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, we name this decision points, and that may or may not even be what you consider a significant decision point, but decisions that we make that start to have a lasting impact, whether positive or negative, right? Maybe
Absolutely.
you touch the hot stove and you say, I'm not going to do that anymore, or whatever. What caused you to say, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer?
Okay. I think I was still in the mindset of do what you're good at.
Yeah.
So that is kind of defines almost the first part of my life. I don't think that way anymore. I still think it's a good idea for some people. For me, I have to do what I love because I've learned over many, many different types of jobs and dipping toes into careers that I am a self-teacher and I'm very enthusiastic and I can be good at anything. So I cannot be great at everything. I really believe that we can only be great at what we love. So at the time, I believed it was vice versa. What are you good at? That will inform what you do. So I took the LSAT just to kind of see, because again, I was coming out in a recession and there really weren't a lot of obvious opportunities. Legal assistant was just a stepping stone job. You weren't going to, unless I wanted to become a paralegal, which is an option, but not, the way I was raised actually was weird. It's strange. I'm not one of these families whose generations of education on both sides, male and female, high expectations. And they really, really wanted us to get graduate degrees. My mom was like, absolutely, you cannot depend on anybody else the rest of your life. You must get a graduate degree. So of the 4 kids, you got 2 MBAs, a JD, and an MD. We took that to heart.
That was your culture. That
was it.
And
it served me well. It served me well. So I thought, well, I haven't taken math, obviously, in a while. So can't do that. One of the reasons I chose Princeton was at that time, at least, no math requirement. And so I thought, well, med school, I didn't take any sciences because of the math. And then the med school's out and that makes, business school's out. So I guess I got law school, right? So I took the LSAT and then I did very well on that. So I thought, well, that's what I'm good at. And plus I'd been very well trained. I will say that Princeton props for their philosophy department, which is outstanding, world-renowned philosophers leading it, teaching there actively. And it's not enough when you write a paper to be able to argue your point and then maybe argue the other side and then counter argue. You have to go like 5 deep. You have to argue your point, predict what they're going to say, then rebut that, then predict again what they're going to say to that and rebut that. By the time you get out of there, you're pretty well trained to think like a lawyer.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal pathway to legal career.
Absolutely wonderful. And so I decided, well, I'll go to law school, right? So then I made a terrible decision. So let's talk about decision points here. I thought, well, probably not going to live in Texas because I had such wanderlust. I mean, that was not my fault. I really did. After hitting the world over the place, it wasn't Texas itself. It was just live where I started. Like that's right. I have this.
I love it, but I've already done it.
I love it, but I got to go new. And so I thought, I can't go to UT for law school because if I go there, I'm going to really be beholden to the alumni network. It's so strong. It's so strong, right? But it's so Texas-based. And I thought I'm really going to have to use, I was looking at statistics and it was showing like what percentage of law graduates from UT left the state of Texas, and it wasn't very high. And that was by choice, of course. UT is a fantastic school. So this is why I say, like, if that was, let's say at the time, this is early 90s, and I'm looking at the schools, and maybe University of Michigan, I think it was top 5. I want to say like it was number 5, maybe number 4, and then UT was definitely around like 10. It wasn't a huge difference in rankings, but it was a massive difference in price because I had held on to my in-state residency. I had that driver's license. That was my permanent address. I think my tuition that I was looking at was $3,500. And I thought, at Michigan, where I can spend $33,500 will put me in a position to go wherever afterwards. So that decision was one of the only wrong decisions I look back on my life. And I think that really did change my trajectory in a way that was a little bit out of my control, because it put me $100,000 in debt. 'Cause my parents paid for all our undergrad, but they were like, you're on your own for graduate school. So
interesting.
When you're in debt like that, you cannot work for the government. I was never going to be a prosecutor. I learned that pretty quickly in law. And that is how people end up in these big sweatshop law firms. And I ended up in one of those top 3 huge law firms in Chicago, and I just had a lot of debt. So when you have that, it does take the reins of your life for a while. Yeah. So while I have no regrets, I would not necessarily, I do have wisdom, and I would use my wisdom to advise younger people faced with the same choices, to think hard about something like that.
Yeah, I think, I love how you said that. It's wisdom versus regrets.
Yeah.
Regrets kind of make you a victim and make you backwards looking, as opposed to wisdom is forward thinking. Understand that if you do this decision, these are the consequences potentially that could come from it.
It's all about informed decisions.
Yep, that's well said. So you graduate Michigan Law School, and then you take a job in Chicago.
Right. I worked for the firm in California. I was still trying to get to California. I'm still trying today.
It's a pretty place.
And you know what? I'm going to go visit your daughter pretty soon.
There's still time. There's still time.
So I had worked for O'Melveny and Myers in LA, and then I had worked for Mayer Brown and Platt in Chicago, and then I kind of let romance be the tiebreaker. So I took the job in Chicago.
Yep.
And I was dating a guy for all 3 years of law school, and he wanted to stay in Detroit, and I wanted to go to LA, and we're like, well, let's just both go to Chicago for a year, and then we'll figure it out. And so we planned that, and then broke up right before the move. And so then I'm like, well, I'm in Chicago, and I'll just stay here for a year, and then I'll go to LA. And then 7 months into that year, I met my husband, who's from Illinois, and so that was it.
You were
Chicago
there
forever.
And y'all have kids?
Yes, 2 kids. Two kids.
And where are they, and what are they
They're
up to?
fantastic. My son is 21. He'll be 22 next month. And he's a senior at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana, doing great. He's co-majoring in finance and real estate. Then he went there actually to study entrepreneurship, and after about a year, like all real entrepreneurs, he's like, I don't need someone else to tell me how to do this.
just go do it. Right. Just go do it.
I'm going to go learn these things from you guys, and then I'm going to do my own thing anyway.
That's smart.
Yeah, he's had his own business since he was like 13. And then my daughter is a freshman now. She's at University of Kentucky. She's just decided not to major in psych, which is what she went there to do. And so she's going to go back to the general pool, reset, figure out what she wants to major in. But she's totally happy, and so I'm an empty nester.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. What was, and we're going to kind of transition here and get into RISE and WHD, but as an attorney, what was mostly your field? How long were you kind of in that day-to-day grind, and what were you doing in that field?
So as you know, I've got this restlessness about me, and I also have a tendency to get bored, so I have to keep
it moving.
Yeah, keep it moving. And I like to be busy and engaged always. Mm-hmm. So the second I start to tune out and get a little bored, I just immediately find something else. So I did about 2 years at Mayer Brown on the transactional side, doing a lot of security, M&A and some deal work and things like that. And then that was a really long slog for a young associate, because you're just mired in busy work for the first several years. And I couldn't imagine anything that I was going to be doing for years. Yep. So I thought, well, this firm actually let me move over to litigation. Most firms will not let you do something that big. But I went and I talked to people there, and they said, yeah, I'll let you go to litigation. So I moved over for about 2 years, and I think maybe I started doing securities malpractice. Maybe it was still a transitional move into litigation. But at the end of the day, I just was doing commercial litigation, and that was fine. But I was restless then too, because those 3 years, you're mired in. I was working for Michelin, had their tires blowing on the road, and so there were lawsuits against Michelin, and I was spending 7 months of the year in Spartanburg, South Carolina, deep in bankers' boxes, and
It's beautiful. I went to Furman, which is in Greenville, South Carolina. It's prettier today.
I know where Furman is. And my sister-in-law used to live in Greenville, and I'm a big fan of Greenville.
Well, it's much better now than it was when I was there.
Spartanburg at that time, it was fine, but if you took one wrong turn and you were no longer in the city limits, it was just a little different. Yeah.
It's not Chicago.
So I ended up doing almost all my work for one client, and that was Arthur Andersen. And I thought they were trying to get me to come over there, and it was really attractive at that time because they were saying, look, you still have a partnership track.
Right.
And that was unusual. If you went in-house from a law firm, you were giving up a partnership track. You were just going to be an in-house lawyer. But Arthur Andersen, not only could you stay on a partnership track, and they were making in-house lawyers partners left and right, but you were a partner in the firm,
Right.
which was a much wealthier firm than a law firm that's just doing these because at that time they still had lots of other service lines too.
Yeah.
It wasn't just public. So I can't actually remember if when I came in I had already split to public auditing only. I can't remember exactly how that all played out, but I know that I officially made the move to Arthur Andersen in 2001. So for those of us who've ever heard of a company called Enron, that restatement happened in November of 2001. I think I officially started July 2001, something like that. And I was pregnant, and I went on maternity leave. And when I left for maternity leave, I think this is a lesson in like how valuable I actually am as a person and as an employee. There were 200,000 global employees. Then I come back. I leave for like 2 months. I come back and there's under 200 left. So
incredible?
the whole place, my future, the life trajectory, my professional trajectory. I had a child, and I had left Mayor Brown. I did have talks with people at Mayor Brown, and I knew that was an option to go back there, and that was a tremendous comfort. But I ended up, again, it's one of those things where you can look at things, everything in life is perspective.
Yep.
Everything, right? And some people didn't make it through that time because their perspective was so bleak. And I understand that. But I ended up deciding to stick it out because I saw some amazing opportunities that I could have from this.
So you went back and you were one of the 200 at Arthur Andersen?
I went back to Arthur Andersen. Yeah. I was now down to, of the in-house lawyers, they had a huge in-house legal department. It was like a law firm. When I started there, it was 77 maybe in-house lawyers. By the time I went back, it was no more than 10.
Yep.
But I had a chance to have virtual autonomy on massive cases, and I was only 5 years out of law school. And that was not something that any one of my peers at a firm had. I think I had over $1 billion in litigation claims on my personal docket alone. The board was overwhelmed. We did not have the same processes as we had before, where everything, of course you would run everything up the flagpole. Here it was, we have to have people we trust.
Yep.
We don't have time to meet with you every second, hold your hand. We got to know what's going on. We have to know that you can do this. And so as a very young associate, I really had opportunities presented to me that were at least 5 years ahead of my, of the regular trajectory. And it was fantastic for building confidence, for having these opportunities that you could talk about and that you could put on your, I don't want to say resume because I'm not talking about paper resume. I'm just talking about when you're talking to people, your life resume. So for me, it was pretty wonderful. And I did stay there for 5 more years to help see Andersen through that time. They were a limited liability partnership, and they really didn't want to test the limits of what that actually meant. They had a lot of retired partners. They didn't want to know if they didn't want anything to even potentially be taking money out of their pockets if they could at all save these families and those livelihoods, people who weren't even there anymore. So I stayed there. I actually was in the second row at the U.S. Supreme Court when they had oral arguments on Andersen's appeal of its criminal conviction, and it was one of the fastest opinions ever released then by the Supreme Court. This was one of the very first ones that came out weeks later, unanimous 9-0, overturned it, but it was too late. Andersen had already been ruined, so it was no bringing it back, but they overturned the conviction that had been the death knell. So it was very sad. It was a tough time, but it was a period of great growth for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are one or two takeaways from that entire experience?
Oh, I will tell you right now that the biggest takeaway I have is really my life perspective, which is that you have got to keep your eyes open to opportunities, and they will come in the most unlikely of places. And every successful person I know is someone who has recognized the opportunity and not been afraid to take it. And I could have gone either way, because I could have left and they were paying us handsomely to stay or even to go. I mean, you could get a good severance agreement after the first year there because they knew what you had given up. But I saw a uniqueness in that period. But I also had a tremendous empathy in that period, because we really did, I was not used to that level of, an emotional impact on my clients. I've been doing corporate work. It's a lot about dollars. It's a lot about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. It's not a huge amount of emotional investment, unless you're dealing with closely held businesses, but when you're working for huge firms, you're not. And it was a real lesson in humility and in empathy. I'd say that was the second takeaway there.
Yeah, because it destroyed a lot of people's lives.
It really irrevocably.
200,000 people, and then not to mention the Enron careers.
100%.
How many? It's a lot of hundreds of thousands of families.
And I know a lot of the people that were tied in there too from Houston days. So I really I saw it all, and there were suicides, and there were just a lot of tragedies that came out of that. And it really, really drove home a human interest to me, to when you're dealing with people where it's easy in some of these very high corporate jobs that are really focused on high net worth corporations, to lose sight of the humanity of all of it.
What are you going to say to a business owner listening who might have just gotten the worst news possible about their business, like recently? I mean,
it's very fact specific, right? So it's a little hard, because I would give me a scenario of the worst news possible. I mean, different things to different people.
I mean, they can't make payroll. They've got to fire their best friend. Something that just seems massively overwhelming. We had the conversation today with an EOS implementer, an operational system, and talking about the worst days, and all you can see is right here.
That's right.
You said perspective. I just want you to, how would you encourage someone who's just gotten really difficult business news? Not necessarily personal, and maybe but
that's right.
Because you were in the fire for a long time.
I was.
And you knew all these people. You're managing the dollar. Yes.
I was. I think you need two things.
Okay.
One, you have got to get outside help in certain areas, because you cannot take the DIY route of managing your decisions at this point and your actions at this point from a highly emotional place.
Yeah,
that's good.
So you need someone that you have a fit with, that you have a trust with, who can even be trusted to handle negotiations for you, or speak on your behalf.
But I'm prideful. I'm really good. I've built a $100 million company. I can solve this myself.
100%. You can do it. Should you do it? I can drive 120 miles an hour on the Kennedy in Chicago. Should I do it?
But you might also argue that I can't do it because I'm too subjective. I'm too emotional into it.
Well, absolutely. So that leads me to my second piece, which is to hire somebody. And it could be, I would recommend definitely before an attorney. It could be a coach. It could be a consultant. I'm very specific about when I recommend people go to therapy and for what purposes. So at this point, I would say a coach or a consultant is probably your best. It could be a business coach or consultant. It could be a life coach or consultant. Right. A lot of these people have a lot of cross disciplines anyway. But the idea is to help you keep perspective, not just on the situation, but on who you are. Because these opportunities are great, or these times, the trying times, are great opportunities for looking inward to figure out, what do I want? What do I want, and who am I? Because a lot of the times we let ourselves be governed by life happens, and that dictates who we are. Yeah. What we end up doing, the things that happen around us, that informs my identity, instead of knowing my identity and having that inform my life choices and what happens around me. And so you may find that the way you're used to doing things, or the instincts that you have, are not actually the ones that will put you on the trajectory to be the person that you want to be in 10 years. And it doesn't mean you can't treat people with with empathy and kindness, because that person, that coach and consultant, you have to be very careful who you pick, because I would say they have to, above all, have three things. One is expertise in dealing with somebody in your situation. 2 is heart. They have to absolutely be able to have empathy and either understand your shoes, put themselves in your shoes. And the third one, and I almost say this is the most important one, they have to be very creative when it comes to problem solving. They have to be able to think outside the box. They have to be able to say, the situation is this. You want to do A, which is really incompatible with what you want in 10 years. But you feel so strongly that doing A or not doing A is tied into what kind of person you want to be. Like having that tough conversation with the person you've known forever. You know, how much do you owe that person? What would they do if the roles were reversed? But you think, okay, it's not that binary. It's not that black and white.
Yep.
How can we think outside the box to keep you where you need to be, given what you've figured out about who you are and what you want in this life turning point, decision point, if you will, where you can do that and still make these decisions in a way that you won't regret, because everything is about minimizing regret. Everything, right? So I would say that.
It's really helpful. I mean, I heard 3 things there. If you're in a real juncture of a decision point, I want to say them back because I think they were worth repeating. And there was someone needs to have experience.
Right.
You want them to have heart.
Correct.
And 3, creative problem solving.
Absolutely.
And that's sage advice. That's really good advice. How did Rise Mediation and WHD Consulting start? What are they? What were they born from? What do they do today?
Okay. I left the practice of law, when I decided to leave Anderson after so many years. I had little children at that time. They were 2 and 4, and I lived out in the suburbs of Chicago. And without getting off on these tangents, I will just tell you that I spent 5 years as a screenwriter, and then I spent several years doing basically 4-hour-a-week volunteer work.
Okay.
I was on various boards, or basically doing a lot of stuff that had to do with my children.
Yep.
I founded a national sports organization, things like that. And I had done a lot of different things by that point. And heading into, I've always wanted to do my own thing. I've always known that tendency to get bored could best be mitigated by doing my thing.
Yep.
But I didn't really know if I had the guts to do it, because I had these 2 little kids, and I always thought of myself as I'm married to this guy, and he's here, and I'm here with these 2. I'm 3 people, he's 1. Together we're 4. But moms think of that way.
Yeah.
We're always, you're those people. You're you plus your kids moving through life.
Yep.
And so it really does impact your risk taking. And I didn't really have the answer to that question. Did I really have what it took to? I knew kind of what I wanted to do, what I liked to do, but I didn't know if I had the guts to do it. Well, heading into the pandemic, I was working for 2 entrepreneurs in New York. I was working in cross-partisan politics, and I was working also in the travel tech space. And I was an insider, and a strategic advisor in both of those roles. So I was watching up close what they were doing to follow their passions. And really in Manhattan, it was just, you're under fire all the time. It's fast-paced, it's exciting. You're surrounded by very smart, very ambitious people. And I was watching them and I'm thinking, I can do this, I can do it. But I still wasn't sure,
Still got to do it.
If I wanted to do it, right.
Right.
So I got divorced I think we decided the divorce in 2015. It was final by the end of 2016. Then I was working for these entrepreneurs. This is all right around the same time. So 2016 to 2019, I'm divorced.
And how old are the kids
and I'm doing this. When by this time, let's see, they were in high school when the pandemic hit.
All right.
So they were in middle school when I'm doing that.
Okay.
Then when I handled my own divorce, and my ex and I were absolutely committed to not doing litigation. I will say, tremendously proud of the fact that we both kept our eyes on the kids as the top priority. Having helped so many people through divorce, I now see how incredibly hard that can be to do.
Yep.
And so we mediated for 15 months. We didn't just do a short mediation. This mediation went on and on and on. And so I was handling my own side of that. And through that journey, I started to kind of informally help other people with theirs. And then as I started to do more and more of that, and this was just for free, this is just, my friends need help.
Right.
Then I started to do more and more and more and more. And I started to have, can't help it. Business plans are forming in my mind.
Exactly. The entrepreneur's in there.
That's right. And as I'm meditating, I'm really like I'm no longer in like that strange part where you can go when you meditate of your mind. I'm now just business plans.
Yes.
Okay. So I decided that when 2020 hit, and again, when I talk about seeing opportunities, I saw a lot of things happening at once. First thing I saw was the financial fear. Because now you have families, and this is especially true of business owners, small business owners, right? They did not know what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We also had people in very, very close quarters. I do not personally know people who were great going into the pandemic and then it fell apart, but I know plenty of people who had fissures, little cracks going into the pandemic, and it blew it up.
Yep.
Increase in digitization so that you could be anywhere. Like my clients no longer had to be 20 minutes from me so that they could come to my office, right? It's all Zoom. And so you had the spike of divorces. You could do anything over Zoom. People were worried about their finances. A lot was happening at that time. And a lot of people were asking me for divorce advice. And I thought, I actually have experience now.
Yep.
So not only from the legal perspective, but now also from a consulting perspective. And since then, I've only added to that with, classes and training and all that. But any event. So I decided I'm gonna just do this during the pandemic, and I'm just gonna start to do some consulting. And I thought I would just do it for women because that's who was calling me.
Yeah.
And so I was very private about what kind of consulting. It was a little bit of a difficult scenario in terms of when you're talking to entrepreneurs out there and you have to market yourself and you need to, advertise or get out word of mouth. But it's hard to build it when you feel, as I do, that so much of what you do is essentially founded on discretion. So some people that I was helping maybe hadn't even told their spouses yet they were thinking about divorce. They sure hadn't told their employers yet. And the last thing I wanted was for someone to be walking by and see an email from so-and-so at divorce consulting, whatever it would be. I didn't want anything like that.
Yep.
I didn't want divorce to pop into their inbox. I didn't want there to be on their browsing history a divorce in my URL.
Yep.
I didn't want to bill to people that that's what I did in case someone said, oh, she got a business card from this person. Like, let's go see what that person does. Oh, divorce, right? So I had to somehow build this business without using the word divorce.
Yep.
And it was tricky, but I was able to do it, but it's been slow. It was slow until, I've kind of, wheels are up, like, all right, it's divorce. You all know what I'm doing.
Right. Well, and again, it's a difficult situation, but you start to be trustworthy and good at it.
That's right.
And business is going to flow. That's how it happens.
And that's what happened is, the referrals are word of mouth. Well, before you know it, the reason I say I was only helping women, but it's changed is because I'm a very loyal, and I was never able to say no to a friend, not a client, but a friend who sent me a man who wanted my help. And I thought, wow, it's really hard because I know I got to keep my niche kind of specific. And I thought, all right, fine, just this one. And then just this one is, right, then I started to find the appeal of working with men. There's really a very unique appeal about it. So I've been doing both on the individual consulting side. Well, the other thing that I was seeing is that a lot of the problems that people face in divorce really could and should be averted through mediation. And mediation is not always, I think, done the right way. It's not always well advertised in terms of what is it. It's available to you. It is not lawyers. Family law is a tricky thing because if you think about it, if you work for a big firm and your client is Dow Chemical or whatever it is, well, whatever you're working on for them, when that ends, like they have other business for you. But if you're working for an individual, their divorce ends, that's over.
Yeah, there's no repeat business.
Yeah. Right. So how do you keep finding a new client every week? And well, if you are always tying things up quickly, you'll never be able to get out of biz dev ever. So
interesting.
It's I would find that even lawyers who I knew to be ethical, great people weren't saying early enough and strenuously enough, you don't need me.
Yeah.
Or you need to use me in a different capacity. Mediation is the first and best thing you can do. And
because it was bad for their business model.
Yeah. And I don't think it really rises to the conscious decision making like that.
Agreed.
I think the truth is it's just not what they do.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was trained as a lawyer, it was not trained on how to pass something off to somebody else. It was trained to be a zealous advocate. And maybe finding a compromise is not always zealous advocacy. So it's difficult because you have to really, am I trying to win for them today? And the other thing is everything's, when you're in law, it's a lot like sports. A lot of stuff is defined by the W and the L, right? And the thing about divorce is that what can be a win today can really be a regret later. If I hadn't pushed for that one more thing, if I hadn't held firm on this just because we were in that contrarian place with each other and he said black, so I said white. If I hadn't held firm on this, which it turns out I don't really even care about now that I'm out of the emotional fog, if I hadn't done this, we would have a better relationship. We would model that better for our kids. We would have, be able to be friends. There's a lot of dominoes that fall in divorce with every decision that you make. And I am a firm believer that mediation is there are two things you can do to best position yourself for coming out of divorce as cleanly, as cost effectively, and with as much sanity as possible, and for the best parenting. And that is mediation and prenups. Big fan of both. So I thought and when I was trained to be a mediator, I saw all sorts of other kind of family conflicts that could be many, many more outside of just divorce. And so I do mediate for families and all sorts of kinds of conflicts. But I don't even sometimes rise to the level of going to court. But that is why I thought, well, you know what, I can work individually on behalf of these people. But I think sometimes the way I can best serve them is to actually not be an advocate, but to be neutral and to work on behalf of the family.
When so many of the people who will listen to this will own a business as a husband and wife. I know it may not be specific to your experience, but I imagine you've mediated. What are coaching? How would you coach a husband and wife who own a business together? What are some best practices for them to keep themselves from divorce in that situation? Or you know where I'm going.
I do.
I just feel like there's some pragmatics that business owners could really use as a husband and wife.
That's right. So the first thing is, and I think that money being as much of a trigger as it is for divorce, because the three biggest drivers of divorce, most people can guess the first two, money and sex. The third one, people don't guess, but it's right up there, is loneliness within the marriage. Loneliness within the marriage often comes from communication difficulties surrounding 1 and 2. So if you're not talking about the money problem, you're not talking about the sex problem, you can feel that you're on your own and you're the island.
You're
and
isolated.
there's not support. Right. So communication is the absolute number one best thing you can do for your marriage, period. It is also the best thing you can do for your business. So what happens a lot when you have two people in business together is they still, just like in these generational home patterns, they tend to fall into certain roles. And then women in particular, because they tend to be, men will kind of fill their lives with 3 super important things and then be awesome at those 3 things, family, sports, and business, whatever it is. Like these are the 3 things I concentrate on: fitness, whatever, religion, whatever it is that we're really into. And women kind of are like, well, I'm going to get as deep as I can on these 20 because I just got so many roles. And we do that. And so we're always looking for something that we can check off the list. So I see women that tend to, once they've defined their role within that company, they tend to kind of turn off everything else about the company. So first thing you need to do is really look at that communication about finances, about roles, and to both of you need to have regular check-ins on what is going on and what are the big decisions that need to be made. So like I said, I'm a big fan of a prenup, and why? Not because of what it'll do for your divorce, but because of what it'll do for your marriage. So the prenup actually does make your divorce cleaner. Here's the news for all of you out there who don't have one or don't want one. You already have a prenup. It's called the divorce laws in your state. That's your prenup if you don't enter into one. That will determine how things get split. And it's very counterintuitive sometimes. We think like, oh, well, the car is in my name, so it's mine. And then you go to your divorce lawyer and they're like, no, it's yours. If you wanted it to be the intuitive way, you needed to set that out in your agreement. So the prenup, yes, it makes things easier in divorce, but it actually encourages communication, it encourages transparency, it encourages fair play. And so when you are making decisions about how to treat money in your marriage, that's the same thinking that you need to have going into your business. We are going to meet once a week, 10 minutes. Well, we're going to make these decisions together. Any expense or decision over X dollars, we're going to do this together. How are we going to fund it? Where are we going to fund it from? What kind? And when you're talking, outside of a business, if you may just be a very wealthy couple and they don't roll their hands off with their own business or whatever it is, you still want to have over what dollar amount do we have to check in with each other? What are your fun, crazy things that you do, and what are mine? We don't ever want to have resentment about you pulled out this money to go travel. You pulled out this money to go to the med spa. Instead, let's just say we're going to give ourselves allowances. Either we fund the joint account and then we pull out separately over time regularly, and we know that that's what we're spending on our idiosyncrasies, or we fund our separate accounts and we put that money into joint, on those same regular bases. There's lots of ways that you can do it so that just to release the friction, you're communicating, you're being open, you're minimizing the chances that you guys are going to fight over this dollar or that dollar. And that's the same thing for your business plan. So I would say whether you're actively running a business together, whether you own a business and one of you is participating or neither of you are really participating hands-on, it's all the same, which is you need to know what's going on in that business, and you need to know that that not only are you committed to the partnership dynamic, but people play less games when they know the other person is watching.
That's good.
In fact, for women, I'd say the number one mistake I see them make is not paying attention to the finances in the marriage or the business and not making a secret of that fact. You'd be surprised at how many shenanigans by the other side are like out in the open because we don't have to hide it because she's not looking.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's the same for a business.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's like having open, honest communication, whether in marriage or in business. I mean, we talk through EOS, we talk through running companies. The best companies, all the knowledge is not in one person's head.
Yes, that's right.
It's documented and processed. And in many ways, I hear you saying this in the same way in a marriage and in great communication. If you're a business owner and married and you work together, and even if you don't, but document and process.
That's right. Document and process. And speaking of documents, your organizational documents for that business are going to be really, really critical. And the time to make all these decisions, the time to do a prenup or to look at these partnership documents is when your marriage is good. Right? Because people are much more open to cooperating because no one thinks the other person has wronged them yet. Right? And so when you're documenting things, what happens there should be a clause in every single partnership contract. I hope everyone can hear me. What happens in death or divorce? And I promise you, your partners will love you if you will address that. If every partner says, should I die or should we get divorced? Here is what happens. Because if you don't have that, it is a recipe for a longer divorce, a more expensive divorce, a breakdown in relationships with your business partners. It is a recipe for disaster. So you've got to have that in there when there is even if you're not in business with your spouse. Right. Because especially in a community, so most states are community property. And most states are equitable distribution, and there are about 9 states that are community property. So Texas is one of those, I think, still. Community property is everything's 50-50. If it started after the marriage, everything. And unless it's either community property or it's separate property. You have to define what's community and what's separate if you want to define it instead of the state law. Like I said, just because you own the car in your name doesn't make that separate property. So you have to define it if you want control over that. And then you have to know that in that split or whether you're in an equitable distribution split, which is based on fairness, either way, they're going to decide what happens to this. And it is almost always, unless you brought it in before, unless you started the business before the marriage, and you documented really carefully to make sure that the marriage wasn't going to change the ownership status of that business. Unless you did it, there's a really good chance you have a marital situation there. And when you get divorced and only one spouse has an interest in that business, the other spouse, especially if they are hands-on, or God forbid it's a service business where they're actually the person who, if I weren't here, this wouldn't be a business. Mm-hmm. And now the other person's saying, well, you have a choice. You either need to pay me a ton of money and work forever to keep paying me, or, you have to sell your business. You have to liquidate your business to buy me out. And your partners are going to be really mad if you didn't prepare them for that.
How many situations are there where you sit down with a couple in mediation and you're like, they don't have to do this? Like, if they did a little work here, a little work there, a little work there, we could avoid all this. We could right the ship.
That's
get
right.
them back on the path.
All of them.
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
This is a great mediation story. This is a real plug for mediation. And I want everyone listening to try to visualize this as I tell you. I didn't come up with it, but it's the example of an orange. So in court, the husband and the wife, or even in this case, the two business owners, right? They are both fighting over this orange. But let's make it easy. Husband and wife fighting over the orange. And that's all the court can see. And the court has another case coming up in 5 minutes. They don't have time for this. No one wants to spend more money. The court's like, slice the orange in half. Both of you go home. Both of them are devastated. And the reason they're devastated is because if they had spent any time in mediation, the job and the skill set of a good mediator is to completely blow through what you want and why you say you want it. They want to get down to really what you need. What's the primal urge that's making you hold the fort on that one thing? That's the hill you're going to die on. Why? What do you need that you feel is being met in that way? And when you ask those questions and when you find out what's really going on underneath, you might find that for this orange, well, he just wanted to make orange juice and he needed the inside of the orange. And she was baking an orange pound cake and she wanted the zest to the orange. And she wanted the whole peel and he wanted the whole inside, and neither of them gave any hoots about the other. And if someone had known that, everyone could have walked away with 100% of what they wanted and the relationship intact. That's not what happens in court. And so I always see, and even in the stories that are passed along to me in terms of mediation, I feel like with the right questioning, the right problem-solving attitude, that willingness to think outside the box and guide other people to think outside the box, because you're not going to tell them how to do their thing. Your job is to show them what the possibilities are, what the options are, what the lay of the land is, so that they go, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Then they have to own that. It can't be something you tell them to do. But there's always a better way, and there's always a way where everyone can walk away
feeling whole.
Yeah. And feeling okay. And that's when you're able to sit together at graduation. That's when you're able to be like, hey, come over for Easter dinner, and with me and my new partner and the kids, and it's okay.
Yeah.
If you were to walk in to a boardroom or a conference room, and there's 8 or 12 of the senior leadership of a company, and essentially the question here is, what are the mediation tools that a listener right now could try to take into their boardroom when they know that they're at a real odds with 2 verse 8, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are some of the practical tools? And one of them might be get outside coaching. And if that is, great. But what are some of the pragmatic tools from mediation that translate into the boardroom?
Well, there are a lot of them, but I would say the number one thing is to know what will happen if you can't figure it out.
It's good.
So when we're talking about my job, that basically means know the law when you're talking about divorce, something like that, right? Know the law in your state, because you need to know, if we don't work it out this way, here's what's likely to happen, and here's the worst that could happen. Here's the best I'm going to come away with. Here's what I'm likely going to come away with. You have to know, because a couple things will happen. You'll get more serious.
Yep.
Right? Everyone will get more serious if they know. You have more credibility, because you're not coming in and giving ultimatums on things that everyone else in the room knows That person could never get that, which tells me the light bulb goes off that they haven't educated themselves because they've come out with something that is not an informed position. So everyone needs to know there's never a harm in having everyone get informed. Bring someone in, whether it's a lawyer or whatever kind of thing that they're going to battle over. Bring someone in who knows, who has the information. So a difference between a mediator and a lawyer, for example, the lawyer will give you legal advice. They don't just have all the information, they'll give you advice. So you don't want to do that in the situation you're talking about because everyone has different agendas and they want different things. But you can always bring in the person who gives the information. As a mediator, I wear this hat, not my law hat. I never give advice, but I have all the information. I know the family laws inside and out. So here's the information. If you had known this, with a lot of you're shocked at how much people do not know that they don't know what they don't know. Exactly. So that's also my big piece of advice is, develop that muscle, that judgment muscle of knowing what you don't know, knowing when, develop the judgment to know when you need to seek someone else's expertise. And so that could be either from a place of lack of knowledge or what you referenced earlier, from a place of high emotion. There are times when you go, okay, this is a place where it's not a DIY, right? So there's no harm in bringing in someone from outside. Doesn't have to be a coach or a consultant, but someone who can be that checkpoint when we need to know, okay, well, what if we try to structure it this way? Or what would happen if we never reach agreement on this point? Oh, well, here's what'll happen. Here's what's likely to happen. Have that information benchmark available. So I'd say that's the first thing. The second thing is try to set, however you want to do it, that doesn't seem hokey, but everyone needs to come in committed to go through this, play this game, go through the motions, however it is, as an adult. And that means when things get heated and when an invective starts flying or someone starts, it's done. It's done. It's done for today. It's not done forever, but it's done.
Yep.
We're not gonna tolerate it because what happens then is you end up spending much longer and people dig in their heels much more. So you get intractable, you get farther apart, and things take longer and things cost more, which, what do you think? Does that make people feel better? No, it just makes them more emotional and more irate. So you have to have an agreement about setting the tone, and you have to have that neutral information benchmark available.
So helpful. Because it's that intractable position is a very difficult
hard to get out of it.
It's hard to get out of it.
Very
because,
hard. Again,
and to your point, Annie, it's you got to get to the why behind it, and generally it always somehow root back to pride. Generally, but I don't want to oversimplify that. But how we work, and I love thinking through. Okay, if we go through this, here are the real consequences.
Absolutely,
makes you more serious. Probably makes you more honest, which is helpful in the process.
What's the plan from here? So you got Rise Mediation, you got WHD Consulting. Like, what's your vision and plan?
Well, it's interesting because I would like to serve more people than I can serve in this one-to-one format on the consulting.
Yep.
And I never want to give that up because I find that my best work and my highest personal satisfaction comes from the one-on-one work. I love the mediation as well. I think on the mediation aspect, what I would like to do is train people to mediate in my style, in my thinking, with my perspective and my tools, and then set them up to be proxies and do their thing.
Like a certification or a licensing.
I think it's even more than certification licensing because that will give you, although I do feel strongly that some places are better than others for that too. So I would like you to go here and have this training, but also it's how you interact with people, your priorities for them. And I'm very, very, I would say the thing that maybe sets me apart the most is that I'm very forward focused and I'm very long-term focused. And I know that who you are today and what you want today and the demands that are placed on you today are going to change dramatically. They're going to change 1 year, they'll be different 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years, 20 years. And my whole aim is to minimize regret, right? Maximize your solid foundation of who you are and what you want in life and make your decisions accordingly and minimize regret. So I'm always playing it out. So it's not just what's likely to happen in the courtroom 6 months from now. It's given who you want to be 10 years from now or 20 years from now, how are you going to feel about having made this decision? Those can be very, very different questions. So when I train people, I would like them to be in my way of thinking, my methodology, and to have the same attitude as I do in terms of things like how you control that room, how you control that space, and for the best outcome, because I think the best outcome is the least regrets, the most efficient, and to be honest, the least expensive. Because I feel like if I let it get so out of control, I may make $25,000 on this one couple, but it's a loss for the couple, which is a loss for me. And I would rather make $5,000 and know that they did it right. They did it quickly before they started to hate each other. They made solid decisions, and they went on, and they can send me 4 other couples for the other $5,000 each. But I don't want to just make the 25. So that's it. But for the one-on-one consulting, I just want to find ways to reach more people, but keep that one very close to the vest.
Yeah.
And I will raise one thing, because you asked me to raise anything if I ever thought there's something we need to talk about.
Yes.
All right. So you're in a very exciting time in wealth management, truly. And I don't know enough about I've seen the Fulfilling Lives philosophy, which I love it. It's so in line with what I do and my values, because my personal ethos is about, relationships first, trust first, right? Identity is huge. Looking forward is huge. And making sure that whatever your goals and priorities are for your life, that's what you're going to get. Women and men are very different in how and when they choose to approach wealth managers, and in what they want from their wealth managers. And right now we're in a decade of massive wealth shift from men to women. And I do not feel like this is as widely known as I would want it to be. So I'm giving you this as someone who's in the financial space, to the extent you don't already, this may be the number one thing you talk about in your weekly meetings. But maybe when I talk about it here, maybe you'll hear 1 or 2 things that you didn't know. But you may know all of this, but let me add to it from the perspective of someone who helps women. So the statistics are something along the lines of, I think it's roughly 70% of affluent households in the U.S., the roughly 70% of that wealth is held by boomer households. And then I think it's 2/3 of those households are joint households. And we know from studying gray divorces and women over age 50 and surveying them, that of those joint households, only 40% right now are women making the decisions. So not just are they only 40% taking the key role, but we've already talked a little bit about that tendency of women to say, thank God I can cross something off my list and move it off my plate.
Yep.
When they aren't the key decision maker, they generally say, take it away. Okay, so all of that is happening, but so much of that, more than $10 trillion, is at play right now, because baby boomers are aging out. So even though we have gray divorces that have more than doubled since 1990, and also there's been a spike. They've enjoyed that upward spike, unfortunately, too, through the pandemic and its effects. So not only are they coming into it through divorce, which is really different than men, because men tend to come into wealth either inheritance or building a business or through investing, and women, it can be any of those things, less so investing, more with the inheritance and the business, but add divorce. It's a huge time for them to come into wealth. And so all this money is up for grabs. These boomers are going to die. And you will have women who not only are younger a lot of the times than their spouses, but we have longer lifespans. For women, how we manage our money that we have today is a very different proposition than how men manage their money. We are thinking about how we earn less. There's still a pay gap of about 16% out there. We earn 84 cents to the dollar given the same conditions. We take more time out of the workforce, and we also we live longer. And this generation is so interesting, these 50 plus, because we're in that generation where we were expected to go to college. A lot of our parents didn't go. Mm-hmm. We had to go. And we were before the millennials who learned that college is optional because you could be Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and not go to college if you've got a better plan. So all these women are educated. A lot of them are really highly educated. A lot of them are smart. You don't often see Steve Jobs doesn't die and leave a nail tech people are usually not that different when they enter a marriage. If they are, please get the prenup, not for the finances, but just because you guys don't approach money differently. You approach money differently and you'll never get along unless you deal with it up front. So they have the skills, they have the smarts. They've probably, 40% of them anyway, have stepped away for it for a while. And they no longer feel confident in their ability to take that on, and they sure as heck don't want to take it on. Mm-hmm. And so you've got people who are about to come into, I read somewhere that it's by 2030, they think women will control the majority of then will be projected to be $30 trillion that the boomers will have then. And we're approaching the national GDP. And women are going to be in control of that. And these are not going to be the millennials who have a whole different habit. 75% of them almost are the financial decision makers in their relationship. They are financially literate. They didn't stop and let it go. They care. They invest their money differently. They manage it differently. But these 50 plus are generally educated, bright, about to control $30 trillion by 2030. And what women tend to do overwhelmingly when they come into large amounts of money is change wealth managers. So that could play one of two ways, which is really the people who are listening out there, if you feel that you want a better relationship with your wealth manager, shout now, call it out, because women will change if they feel like that 30-year relationship with their husband, they don't have to feel like they were mistreated in any way.
Right.
They just have to feel like if they weren't important or they weren't consulted, and more than just, being taken to a nail salon, or here, have a dinner on us or go to a Stars game. They have to feel like they're
part
input.
of it.
Yeah, because they're smart and they're accomplished. And a lot of them met their husband at Morgan Stanley, and then they dropped out to go have kids. And 32% of women who drop out of the workforce to have kids don't go back. So a lot of these women who drop out of these high-performing positions aren't going back. But they're that person, and they don't want to be seen as less than that person. And so what happens is then if their spouse dies, women are much more likely to use a life event as a trigger for seeking a new wealth manager. If the spouse dies, I think it's something like 70% of widows change financial wealth managers, and more women are more likely to change wealth managers in divorce than in the passing of their spouse. So they're already 70%.
Good night. Yeah.
When their spouse dies, and they're more than that during divorce. Then unless you have adjusted the client retention to really appreciate the women that are out there and the women that you have, and to keep them on board and keep them in the relationship, then that could be something that you want to think about in the future. And then the other thing is maybe none of this gets, it just keeps between us, however you want to splice and dice. But I would say that then there will also be people who are leaving other wealth managers, and they're up for grabs, and they want a different kind of service.
That's right.
Because we think differently about wealth, we invest differently, we have different priorities, we have different practices. I'll give you some examples. Generally, women, when you ask men and women to define wealth, they define it differently. So both of them will say, the total amount of financial assets that we have access to today. We'll also talk, and then they'll also say financial independence and security. But women will always add in planning for the future. And men sometimes add in planning for the future. I think it's 20% of men, 30% of women will say planning for the future. But that's quite a difference.
Part of the challenge, I think, with the industry in general is that if you look at how people are trained in our industry, they're typically trained as a technician.
Yes.
So think, analytical.
Absolutely. The numbers person is not necessarily the face person.
Or they're trained as a salesperson.
Right.
Right. And so both are off-putting to women.
Right.
Because, a woman doesn't want someone to come speak technical language, and they don't want to be sold either, because if they're being sold,
they don't want to be sold. They sniff it out a mile away.
Makes them feel stupid, right?
Right.
Potentially. And so what they want to be is understood, right?
It's wonderful and kind of heartwarming to hear you say that, because I feel like I can shout that out 1,000 times, and some of the people in position to really affect change don't hear it.
Yeah.
They want to be understood. first of all, the numbers guys, they don't even, this is the same in IT. It could be the same in your investments. When you are a numbers person, like, you know that your wheelhouse is, you're so rarefied up there. You know that most of the people you're talking to don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But what you don't know is that women are going to be more prone to be defensive about that, because men will just, your egos are big, right? You're all alpha. You're like, well, I don't know. Nobody knows. And she's like, I don't know, because I'm a woman and I took 30 years out of the workplace. And that's what message he's trying to send to me. When he's talking down to me, he's talking down to me personally. So you have to be very careful about the numbers people becoming the face, even though there will be times you have to be ready where, and this is what you're talking about with needing maybe a bridge, is that women, again, this is a little different than men. They want to know where that money is going because they view wealth as an opportunity to make a statement in society, to affect societal change. And they don't want to beg on their face and find out that they invested in something that something happens and it was a social situation or a bad message that they don't want to have been a part of at all. And they want to be invested in things where they feel it's sustainable business or it's women helping women. So they care a lot about where it's going and why it's going there. So they do want answers. They want a lot. They're going to have the questions, and you got to make sure that the answers are delivered carefully. And you have to walk a fine line between not talking down to them, but also, this is pretty key, making them feel like it's a relationship where there is no stupid question.
That's right.
So you have to give them that safe space for
100%.
basic financial literacy questions, but also not patronize them. So you got to be like, so you don't want to come in and be like, well, I'm going to explain this to you, because that makes her feel like you assume she doesn't know.
Right.
But you also don't want to say, well, you probably don't know this, so let me explain it to you. So you got to do, the only by really working with women and getting some, listening to female management and networking and maybe getting some focus groups in, can you really understand where that tone is, how to strike it? I think it's like 70% of women prefer to work with a female financial wealth manager, but it doesn't have to be all of them. But it's a lot, but it's not all. They're not dying on that hill mostly. So to the extent you have enough qualified female financial managers, that's great. But they'll work with men just as well, as long as men can learn how to strike that note. And they have different goals, right? Because they are very future focused. They know they're going to live longer. If they live 5 to 7 years longer than men and they're younger than their spouses, they're looking at 10 to 20 years where they got to take care of themselves. They really care about that. And they really care about, the kids too. And so men do too, but they're worried, I'm going to live 10 to 20 years, support myself 20 and still have to support the kids. So it's not just supporting the kids, it's plus my really crazy lifespan. And then they're generally, because maybe they don't have that fluency in the financial literacy that because they put a pause on it 30 years ago. So they don't have that at the moment. It's not current anyway. Because of that, they're more risk averse, right? And so men and women invest differently. Men are more stocks and women are more real estate. And it kind of, they're looking at different things. Men twice as many as women in cryptocurrencies, which is a big issue in divorce. So they're looking at different things. They're looking at different reasons. And they also like a different setup. So they're very high touch. They're very in person. Yeah. And so when you have these guys are the sales guys, these guys are the numbers guys, what we really need are the business people who have that savvy and the time. The number guys don't even if they have the savvy, they don't have the time, who have made the time and the expertise to be able to have a dialogue with a high fluency in the investments, what they're for, how they work, but can translate it for someone who's like, well, explain that to me again, is never going to patronize them because understands where they came from, 100%. Understands that these are bright, accomplished women who feel very strongly and very acutely that they could have, would have, should have, had it been of interest to them, or had they not been spending all this time. I think it's 11 extra hours a week that women spend caregiving, that men don't. So it's, unpaid labor. So if they had had the time, so you got to know who you're talking to, and they want that in-person relationship all the time. Yeah. And so there's a difference too even there, because men want the in-person relationship by and large because they want the alpha dog, because of the way our hierarchies have been built up in professional workplaces. We know that usually the smartest guy gets up there, right? So we want the smartest guy. I'm giving you $10 million, $20 million in investable assets. I want the smartest guy, right? I'm giving you $100 million. I really want the smartest guy. So women, it's not the same necessarily, because they know from having been kept down that the smartest person is not always at the top.
Exactly.
And so they just want the trust and the personal fit and the high touch. So when they find their person, that's their person. And it doesn't really matter where they are in the chain, but they got to be smart. They have to know how to deal with them, and they have to be available. And women also more willing than men to pay a premium for that.
Yeah. Well, going back to what you said a second ago about fulfilling lives, our purpose as a company, if you start with that,
That's right.
like if you start like
Absolutely.
what's important to you, and then you drill into that. And I mean, sometimes what's important might be performance. And so it needs to be a technical conversation.
And it will be a lot. I mean, women are just as happy as men to outperform the stock market. But if there's 10 different ways to get there,
right,
they're going to care about what are my 10 options.
That's right. But what is, you know, for each person individually, how do you define fulfilling lives? And then our job is to go to work on that.
Absolutely.
And that's, you know, I think that's one of the things that's different about the way we approach working with our clients is that we're trying to solve that. And yes, we have all the tools and we have lots of smart people and we have lots of degrees and lots of certifications and, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of experience in the business. But at the end of the day, what is the most important thing to the families we serve?
That is a language that is a language that resonates with women. And especially, I do not want to gloss over, because it is my field, the women, especially these 50 plus, who are going to be facing divorce. There's a huge opportunity there for wealth management. And I want women to hear that they need it, because a lot of them, especially because it's kind of like everyone speaks English, they think they can write a novel. They're like, well, I'm smart and I'm accomplished and I graduated from Yale, so I can do this myself. You got to just give yourself the grace to say, look, this is not something I'm interested in. And if this is you, and pass it on to someone who can take that off your plate that you trust, because they do want to have, divorce is really important. Because for women, it's the impact can be very outsized. So right now, men tend to walk away with, you know, more than twice of the wealth, and women see their household income drop by 41%. And men, it drops for men too by about half that, 20 something. But for women, there isn't the same opportunity to make it up, especially if they took the time off. Yeah. So while men can replenish a lot of that, women don't have that. So what happens is, if they can't replenish at the same rate, they start selling things off and liquidating things. Well, then there's less to sell off and liquidate. And then there's a time crunch too, because they maybe have to liquidate in less than ideal market conditions. So they can end up, they really have to maximize what they have now for that time period that they're looking forward to. So it's not about I can live like this and we'll make it, and we'll just get a great relationship, it'll go. It's, let's assume I never make another dollar.
That's right. Yep.
What are you going to do with this today? Assume I never make another dollar.
Exactly.
So they're, and you often, here's the other thing, baby boomers' parents are very old. So you often have inheritance and divorce happening at the same time. Yeah. That's what you're going to be seeing even more of.
Thanks for saying all that.
Yeah.
It's really valuable.
It is very valuable. Annie, this is incredible. I feel like we just kind of started to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
And I know I speak for Scott and myself. Thank you. I feel more educated today listening. And I think one of the things I just kept hearing you say here these last few minutes, there's just no place for arrogance.
No.
And I think that is what I can be smart. You can be smart. We can all be smart. Arrogance just says I'm better than you, or I know more than you, and therefore I'm better than you. Humility just tends to listen more. You want to understand who the person is you're working with. So if you've been watching or listening, I know you have been encouraged and challenged. I hope, and I know you got some pragmatic tools from Annie on you dealing with something difficult. Could it be divorce? Could it be in the office place? Take a deep breath. Have some good, hard, honest conversations. Get some outside help from a smart person and a caring person.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Decision Points. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.